pass around. Then we said, here I want to show you why. This is it's called the Codex of Privilege of Christopher Columbus. And you would think what Christopher Columbus was Sicily. Why? Where is the connection? We're going to find out later. But I want you to see his signature in the 3 only surviving letters that we have of Columbus.
Sorry.
I should be using that.
This is from Columbus.
Okay, do you see the signature there?
Yes.
Triangle,
Yeah.
ace of 5s, letters, Greek letters, Christopher, the carrier of the cross. All this Renaissance symbolism. Christopherans, the carrier of the cross. Christopher Columbus was a very religious guy, and all the discovery of the Americas, his trip from the other side of to reach the Indies, was on a Christian religious premise. The Ottomans, the Arabs had conquered Constantinople. We couldn't go from that side anymore for merchants, the commerce was blocked, was controlled by them. So he was saying, now we can do commerce with the Indies going the other way, right? And the money that you, the crown of Spain, the queen and the king of Spain, would make out of this new trip would finance a fund to reconquest Jerusalem. So that was the original concept of Christopher Columbus. And the symbolism of this signature takes so long that we cannot do it now, we might do another time, but keep in mind this triangle pyramid within the signature. Okay, now we go back. And going back to symbols, everybody knows this, right?
Yes.
Perfect. What do we have? Perfect human. What else? What comes to mind when you see this?
Geometry.
Geometry. Human geometry. Okay. So the essence of this is the square and the circle. That's the essence, right? And then Leonardo puts a man in it. But he didn't do it himself. It comes from Vitruvius. The Vitruvius man. The man inside here comes from the lecture from Vitruvius. And Vitruvius takes this concept of the square and the circle from Archimedes. And Vitruvius was reading the books from Archimedes. And some things he understood, some things he didn't. And now we'll go through those things. But to see the circle and the square, now that we look at the house here. And look at that circle and the square in the center.
That's some circle.
Okay, so the circle and square are not accidental. Obviously, there is something behind all this. Now, I have videos. If you go into the Villa Zigna Facebook page, there is videos of this solstice, this June. And we were here early in the morning filming exactly right here in front. And summer solstice, the sun rises exactly lined up with that circle. The house has 2 of those circles, one in front one in the back. They are lined up this way, they are square, circle, square, circle. So summer solstice, the sun rises exactly from there. In the winter, on the same spot, is the full moon, the Christmas moon, comes exactly that way. Sun, moon, it takes two of them. Okay, so this in general gives you now how the house was lined up. How, is this accidental? Of course not, because it's mathematically precise. How could these people do that? That long ago measure things this way. And now we go into the culture, the Sicilian culture of the time. The general things that you were asking before, the glacier, the Caspian Sea, Black Sea, if you know the story that the glaciers melted, went up, went back, and the seas dried up all around, and the land was extremely fertile. We're talking about 12,000 years before Christ. There is this big migration of what is called the Proto-Indo-European tribes. They moved from Mehrgarh, India, into northwest, and they settled around these two big lakes or seas in these new fertile lands. We're talking about matriarchal tribes, Indo-Proto-Europeans. Mehrgarh is there. You find Mehrgarh in Mediterranean, I believe in Rhodes again there's a Mehrgarh, and there's a Mehrgarh here in Syracuse, north of Syracuse on the sea. So this name of this town is replicated in different towns all over here, and we have on the northeast side of Etna a door, a stone door with original Sanskrit writing, which means it wasn't passed by generations and mixed with other language. There were people with original Sanskrit that lived here, and the writing in the stone remained there. So this Proto-Indian migration, how did they get here? So at one point, the sea is rising because the ice is melting. The seas are rising. The Mediterranean Sea eventually breaks through the Bosphorus, through Istanbul, Constantinople. And there was what in the records is the deluge, the universal deluge, the flood, the major flood. Apparently, an enormous quantity of water broke through that and flooded again those seas, Black Sea and that before had been drained because of the melting of the ice. So that from that time we believe comes the history about the Great Deluge in the Bible. When they say all the animals died and Noah took all the animals on a boat, and those are the ones that survived. Now, from that story that might relate to this cataclysmic event, and tons of people died, but the survivors moved some north into middle North Europe, which is Hungary, Ukraine, and all the way to Croatia, and some other moved south of these lakes into Egypt, Crete, Rhodes, Cyprus, Sicily. They come this way. And the Phoenicians, apparently pretty much at the same time we had this explosion of civilizations in all these places, all with the same abilities, the same thinking. And how do we recognize the thinking? Because from a matriarchal society, when they were still in the Caspian Sea, they transformed from hunters to settlers and sickle users. The sickle, the cultivation. Remember sickle and connect the word sickle to sickle, Sicily, sickle is the same sound. The same sound of the sickle is in Hungary right now. There is actually in Hungary, we have symbols in some ancient communities in Hungary where they call themselves, they have the symbol of the sickle, they have the symbol of the, Sicily is a trinacria, has the three legs like this. The original is in India. I believe I have a picture here, but the original trinacria is an Indian symbol. Here it is. Please share it here. Eventually, you can. This Indian symbol, we believe, is what became the vernacular symbol for Sicily, which is a goddess, the leader of the So this population have this in common: Indo-European origins. How do they get here? So in Sicily before we have the Sicani and Elimi. The Elimi settled more on that side at the end of this line, toward the Selinunte, and they were of Phoenician, where now is Syria and Lebanon. And they settled there. They were people not interested in conquering land, but commerce. So they settled on the coast, and they were great commerce culture connected with Carthaginians. The Carthaginians have the same origins in North Africa. So these people were purely using the land for work and not conquering inside. The Sicani, which is one of the oldest populations here in Sicily, they were matriarchal. Then the Siculi come in. The Siculi are coming from this migration from Hungary. They come down, they cross the Adriatic Sea. The first kings of Rome were from the Sicani, from the Siculi culture. Siculi, we believe, from Sicle. Those were already patriarchal. How did change happen from matriarchal to patriarchal? Because there were already invasions at the time from what we know later as the Genghis Khan and the Mongolians and so forth. They had already come in with horses, and these people were really moving constantly. They were hunters and nomads. They were constantly moving. And so this matriarchal society had to start organizing with defenses around their small communities, their towns. Fortification between wood and then eventual stones. This technique of the fortifications that we found around the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, we find in all these migrations all around the Mediterranean and Europe. So from the technique, the way they were working these stones, you see the stonework here, you find the same stonework in Ancona on the other side of Italy, you will find in Croatia on the other side. Through the stone cutting and shapes, you find the traces of these civilizations, how they were moving. So all this, we're talking about lots of years ago, so like, now we are 60,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And this is just to give you a sense of where we are coming as people. Before that, the Neanderthal, and before the Neanderthal, the Homo sapiens, these are populations that came here before the Neanderthal. Eventually, they believe they sort of disappeared. They said before that the Neanderthal arrived here, but then it kind of self-exhausted, and then the Homo sapiens came in. And they thought that the Neanderthal and Homo sapiens never really could mate. The DNA was not would not allow procreation. Instead, now they found out that we all have, I don't know if the percentage is like 3% or 2% of Neanderthal blood DNA in us. So actually there was a moment when Neanderthal and Homo sapiens met. And that was before again. No? So just to see how this society comes through this overlapping of different migrations, we can go. So the Sicani are matriarchal societies. They are quite live here. And then come the Siculi. The Siculi are patriarchal, more aggressive, more territorial, and ready for defend and offense. They occupy all the coastline. So the Sicani move inland. So inside Sicily, you find the DNA of the Sicani, and here, all around here, instead is the Siculi, and all this coastline. The Siculi were a perfect match with the Greeks, patriarchal society as well, and Sicily was the most fertile land you could find in the Mediterranean. In Greece, their islands are too dry and not much water. If you need real food, you come to Sicily. So the origin, the story goes that the Hyblaeon, so Ibla, if you put Ibla with an H before Ibla, right? This Ibla, Hyblaeon, Ibla, you know what Ibla is? Ragusa, Ibla, you know, these mountains are all called Ibla. And the king of all this land of the Hyblaeans rented a piece of land where Syracuse is now to the Greeks that came in. The cultural match was perfect. There were lots of Greek men that came here that married local Siculi girls, and the society became immediately They were speaking Greek basically everywhere in all this land. And we talk about 1,000 years before Christ. This was very, it was not a conquest, it was a natural merge of populations. On this side, not on the other side, where the Ellini were. The Ellini eventually became, the Ellini was a little stronger invasion because there were fights between the Greek side and the Ellini side, because of the Carthaginians, the Phoenicians, or different interests. This became one thing with Greece. They called Magna Grecia, like the bigger Greece. And the inside, well, we said the Sicani, they stayed separated. Now, we go down in time, and the important element here to know is, you know Pythagoras? Yeah. You know where Pythagoras was teaching, where was he located? In Calabria. You know Calabria? Crotone? And eventually he died in Metaponto. But the school from Pythagoras continues with Euclid. Archimedes learned from Euclid and therefore Pythagoras. Euclid, Archimedes. A classmate of Archimedes was Eratosthenes. Are you familiar with Eratosthenes? The director of the Library of Alexandria of Egypt. Yeah? So direct descendant of the learning of Aristotle, Alexander the Great, and the Library of Alexander of Egypt. And so this is we are going in this culture will go down between 500 before Christ and 200 before Christ. This 300 years. I call that the modern history for Sicily. And why I say the modern history of Sicily, because at one point something happens in 212 before Christ, when Archimedes gets killed by the Romans. That day, it's like if a cultural cataclysm, earthquake occurred, because the Romans were great engineers, great conquerors.